I want to talk about the recent developments surrounding the character of Bridget, who was recently released for Guilty Gear Strive. In particular, I want to discuss the decision to turn her into a trans character. Now, before I get started, I want to make it very clear that this is not a conversation about having trans characters in video games or fighting games. That is perfectly fine, and in fact, I thought it was implemented very well with the character of Testament. What I want to talk about is very specifically how it fits or doesn't fit the character of Bridget and why I think it was a mistake. Let's begin by going back to Bridget's origins. I'm sure by now, due to the current discussion surrounding the character, that everybody has an idea about Bridget's background. He was born in a village with a superstition that having twins of the same gender was bad luck. As such, his parents, who did have two male twins, decided to raise Bridget as a girl to avoid the curse. As Bridget grew up and learned about this story, Bridget decided to go on a quest and prove that this superstition was wrong. He decided to embrace his identity as a boy and become a bounty hunter, seeking fortune and riches for his village. So that's the background information for the character. But where we really meet Bridget is during the events of Guilty Gear XX. His first encounter is with Ino, who, upon meeting Bridget, calls him a cute little lady. Bridget corrects her, saying, "I'm not a lady, I'm a bounty hunter," using the masculine pronoun boku in Japanese. After this, Bridget gets some fake bounties from Ino and then goes around hunting other characters to claim the riches he seeks. There's two things about these events that I want to emphasize. One is how unconflicted Bridget is about their identity. When Ino calls him a girl, Bridget doesn't hesitate to correct her. They're not flustered about the mistake, as it's probably a common occurrence in their daily life. They're not unsure or distressed or show any signs of inner turmoil. In fact, they don't draw too much attention to it at all. Once the correction is made, that is that, and they move on to different business. The second thing to note is how, aside from this brief mention, Bridget's gender identity is hardly brought up as a topic of discussion. Bridget's storyline is focused around bounty hunting. To me, this shows stability in terms of gender identity. Bridget knows he's a man, so much so that A, being misgendered doesn't faze him, and B, it's simply a background detail of his life. The only other time gender is mentioned in Bridget's story mode is with Johnny, who hits on Bridget and then is distraught after finding out Bridget is a guy. But this is more of a gag poking fun of Johnny being a womanizer, rather than anything to do with Bridget's identity. And in the end, Bridget ends up calling Johnny a weirdo. Accent Core story mode is more of the same. Instead of bounty hunting, Bridget now wants to start some sort of entertainment troupe. In one ending, he ends up joining Jam's restaurant and starts putting on shows to entertain the guests. In another, he ends up back at his home village, only to find out that his brother has left the village looking for him. Bridget then vows to go after and protect his brother. Much like in XX, gender is not only not the focus of the story, it's hardly ever mentioned. Bridget dressing in traditionally female clothing isn't something that's done due to a gender identity crisis. It's just a matter of what he was raised in and what he's comfortable wearing. And despite the confusion that this might cause sometimes, it doesn't matter to him at all. Now, we know that several years have passed between the events of Accent Core and Strive, and we have no idea what's been happening to Bridget during this time. I'm not going to argue that it's not possible that they couldn't have gone through a gender identity crisis during that time, culminating in what we see during the events of Strive. Of course, that's entirely possible, and Arc System Works can take the character in any direction they want. So I want to take my argument beyond just this doesn't make sense for the character and move on to the realm of why this is bad for the character. Bridget to me represents something very special, an idea that seems to be increasingly forgotten in our modern times. OG Bridget dresses in traditional female clothing and presents traditional female mannerisms, and yet this does nothing to take away from his identity as a man. Bridget is a testament, no pun intended, to the idea that your sex or gender doesn't have to dictate what your interests should be or how you express yourself in the world. This is an idea with value, which has now been lost with a new character interpretation. Now, the reason she presented female was because she actually felt female. To me, this change really cheapens the character. Now, instead of representing a confident defiance of traditional gender norms, it instead seems to say that yes, cute clothing and a soft demeanor are only within the realm of women and no one else. Secondly, I can't help but be cynical and think this change was made to pursue current trends, rather than as a genuine and natural evolution of the character. Not that there's anything with chasing trends either, as long as it fits in with the established ideas. Like I said previously, the evolution of Testament felt pretty natural, and yet that cynicism still remains. When I first played the old Guilty Gears back in the arcade, what drew me in was how unconventional the cast was. GG didn't seem to care for what their contemporaries were doing. They marched along to the beat of their own drum, which gave us amazing characters like a weirdo possessed by several ghosts, a crass robot version of a goody protagonist, a homunculus in love with a sentient axe, and Bridget, the lovable bounty hunter raised as a girl, shouting out to the world that his upbringing and outward demeanor did not define who he truly was. Bridget was one of my favorite characters of the old cast. Not for gameplay reasons, but for character reasons, and I'm really sad to see that we did not get that character back in Strive. And for the record, I'm glad the trans community has another representative. I don't want to take away anything from them, but at the same time, I don't want to lose a character that was dear to me either, and quite frankly, I think we could have all had our cakes. As I mentioned earlier, in one of the endings, Bridget sets out to find his brother. How easily it would have been to say that Bridget's brother, inspired by seeing Bridget go out into the world, decided that they too wanted to be a bounty hunter and explore. Perhaps in their journey, they too would discover that they also wanted to express themselves as female, but for entirely different reasons. Perhaps she would find that she actually did feel female at heart, and so begin her own journey of self-discovery, inspired by that bright, strong, and cheerful brother who first set out with courage in their heart. We could have had both, a new trans character and the original Bridget as well, representing two different ideas regarding gender nonconformity and gender expression. Unfortunately, we got what we got, and so lost something unique in favor of something more current and trendy. It's a shame. It always seemed to me that Guilty Gear's character designs were anything but trendy, instead choosing to explore more outlandish and counterculture ideas. I hope that does continue into the future, but for Bridget, it seems they took a step back on this idea. Oh well.